and welcome to the Shaman's View, the view from the invisible world. I'm Alberto Villoldo. I'm a medical anthropologist, and I'm a shaman. I got a call from one of the high shamans of the Andes yesterday evening. He said that he and a group of other medicine men and women had gone to the foot of the holy mountain to begin to work on returning balance to the earth. So it was interesting because yesterday afternoon I talked to a friend, a scientist in Switzerland, who works with one of the big pharma companies, and they're working on the vaccine. Meanwhile, the shamans are working on coming back into balance with Mother Earth. How do we come back into balance with nature and find a place that we can coexist with all life forms, including viruses? A very, very different approach. The Western masculine approach: let's eradicate, eliminate, vaccinate, treat, cure this virus. And the shamanic approach is, how can we come into right relationship? How do we get along with each other? Our bodies are a colony. We're a colony organism. And before we get to today's topic, which is sleeping with serpents, and I want to just briefly mention how we are truly a colony. We have so many bacteria and viruses, from herpes to any number of other critters that we need to be in right relationship with. We need to keep their load, the viral load, the bacterial load low, so that everybody in the colony can get along. Whereas the shamanic view is, how do we come into Aini? Aini means right relationship with all life forms, whether they be in the external world or in our internal world, which is in our gut flora. Our approach to treating a bacterial infection is do antibiotics. And it's amazing how much of medicine, of Western masculine medicine, is It's antibiotics and antihistamines and anti-inflammatories, whereas the more feminine medicine, the one that is comfortable with the power of the serpent. Remember that the goddess Hera in ancient Greek mythology is represented holding two serpents in her hand. She is the one that has the relationship with serpents. And of course, it was the serpent that brought us that fruit of the tree of knowledge, that brought it to the woman, that seduced the woman into wisdom. And the path of the feminine has always been that path, the path of wisdom. But in the West, the serpents have been banished. And it's fascinating. I remember being in Ireland and reading about how St. Patrick in the 5th century drove all of the serpents out of Ireland. He banished them to the sea because they intruded on a fast that he was doing, a 40-day fast, which is a little bit long for a fast. But it's nonetheless, the tale says that he banished the serpents to the sea. Now, in reality, there were never any serpents in Ireland. So Indiana Jones would have been perfectly comfortable traveling to Ireland, to New Zealand, to Iceland, places where there have never been any serpents. But what St. Patrick did was that he banished the feminine. He banished that intimate sexual engagement with all of life, that erotic engagement with the divine. And the divine became a very sterile engagement. Of course, this is what you find happening across many of the Christian lands, is that this kind of deep connection that is feminine and juicy is absent. It's no longer there. I remember as a child looking at the Madonna and see how many layers of cloth she had on her, you could barely tell that she was a woman. And if you look at the great painting of the Last Supper, you find that next to Christ is Christ's partner. It's the feminine, but of course she was disguised as one of the apostles. So the banishing of the serpents is the banishing of the feminine, the banishing of our own sexuality into the shadow realms, disowning our sexuality. And James Hillman, the great Jungian psychologist, said that the shadow in the West is sexual and violent. These are the parts of ourselves that we disown. And to me, there's really one of the scariest things is when I find is when I meet someone that says to me, I am incapable of harming anyone. I am absolutely incapable of harming anyone. I'm really scared of these people because the reason that I know that I can trust a friend of mine is that I know that she is sitting there with a sword drawn on her lap and she chooses not to use it. It's not that she's incapable of harming anyone because I practice deep peace in my life, but I know that if somebody tries to harm my children, that I will hurt them lovingly, of course. So it's when we are in touch with our ability to do harm, but we choose not to. When we are in touch with our passion and we choose to exercise it wisely, then we reclaim our power. Then we don't banish the serpents. We can invite them into our lives. We can dance with them. We can sleep with them. And the serpent, of course, is that serpent energy of the Kundalini. That Kundalini that awakens within us, that awakens our sexuality and our passion. And this is what I love about the Tibetan Buddhism, is that whereas in the rest of the world you find the Buddha standing alone, in Tibet, so many of the images are of these enlightened masters in deep, passionate lovemaking with their consort, intertwined around each other, not disowning the sexuality. So today, when we disown our passion, we disown our own nature and we become separated from our own nature and from nature. Because nature is juicy, it's full of life. It's always in this erotic, sensual dance of creation. And when we deny that in ourselves, we become disconnected to nature. I believe that today, one of the reasons that there's so much imbalance and disease in the world is because of our disconnection to nature. But it's not to the trees and to the rivers and the rocks. That also, we need to go for walks in nature. But you reconnect with nature by reconnecting to your own passion, reconnecting to your own ability to be intimate with yourself and with a loved one. I know people that have been married for 50 years that are happily engaged with each other passionately. And I know people that have been married for 10 years that have been together with their partner for a decade and they become intimate enemies. They're no longer connecting, no longer passionate, no longer engaged. And what happens, of course, is that your inner passion begins to dry out. You become dried out. You lose your connection to that wisdom and to the knowledge. Remember that it was the serpent that brought us that fruit of the tree of knowledge. When um, when the Buddha died, he believed that there were parts of his wisdom that the world was not quite ready for. The world was not ready for some of the practices and some of the teachings. So he hid them, he buried them deep in the waters of time. in a place that they would not be discovered for 500 years. And he called on the Nagas, the ancient serpents, the serpent energy of the Nagas, these great primordial forces of the cosmos that appear as serpents. He called on the Nagas to protect this wisdom deep in the waters of time. And it was not until 500 years later that a great sage called Nagarjuna, the one who tames the Nagas, was able to go and recover these treasures that had been buried in time for when humanity was ready to receive them. So the shaman that I spoke to yesterday evening told me that they had journeyed to the base of the holy mountain of the Ausangate, the place that is the gateway between the worlds, to offer their prayers and their ceremonies that the world can come into balance. And the world will come into balance through the wisdom of the serpent. When we choose to step up to the deep wisdom, when we embrace our intimacy, and when we choose the path of reconnecting with each other and with all of nature as equals, not as something for us to use, not as something to build our houses with or clear our land to put our homes on, but until we embrace the brotherhood and sisterhood of all living creatures as equals, then we'll be able to really come up with the kind of solutions that we need to dream a new world into being, a world that is sustainable and where the rivers are clean. I looked outside this morning. I had never seen the sky quite so clean as I saw it today. Last night, the stars were shining so bright because humanity, as we are in quarantine, is allowing the environment to breathe and to repair and to heal. So, how do we do that once we return to the world? How do we come into right relationship with all creatures? And remember that for the shaman, there's no difference between being killed by a jaguar and being killed by a virus or a microbe. We have to be in right relationship with both, with jaguars and with microbes. Whereas in the West, we think that being killed by a jaguar is an accident and being killed by a microbe is an illness. For the shaman, they're the same. And if you're not in right relationship with both of them, they will both be looking at you as lunch. So here we have an opportunity to reclaim that ancient serpent wisdom of direct knowledge of what is right and what is wrong, of good and of evil. And remember that for the shamans, evil exists, but it's not like it is for the Western masculine traditions where evil is an independent force in the cosmos. For the shaman, evil exists, but only in the hearts of men and women. And once we come and we face our own shadow, we find the demons within us, and instead of battling them, we learn to befriend them and turn them into allies. Then at that point, we will be tapping into our deep wisdom. When we come back to that intimate, juicy relationship with ourselves and our loved ones and with all of life, we will have embraced that serpent energy. We will feel comfortable with these reptiles that have been so maligned in the West. They're extraordinary creatures. We will have befriended that life force, that kundalini energy within us, and invited to awaken every cell in our body for that intimate, sensual, erotic relationship that we can have with spirit and with the divine. So I invite you to call the serpents into your dream time. They are vast energies available to us in a way that it hasn't been in a very long time. This is the energy that the shamans are bringing down. The sky serpent in the form of the lightning, the earth serpent in the form of the rivers, the ancient serpent energy of the Ouroboros, that primordial energy of creation, reawakening that so that we can take that leap into becoming a new human today. Invite the serpents into your dream time, the great nagas that are the keepers of the treasures of wisdom. Don't be afraid of them. And remember, as soon as you come into right relationship with them, everything in your world comes into right relationship. And I remember one time visiting a friend of mine. It was late in the afternoon. He was tired. He'd been working on a new book. And he served me a glass of scotch. We were having a whiskey together. And his little girl came in, his daughter came in and said, "Daddy, you promised me that we would go out and play." And we had just settled into our scotch and into our conversation. And he took a page from National Geographic and tore it out and cut it. And it was a picture of the Earth from space. And he cut it into 20 pieces. And he gave the pieces to his daughter and a piece of tape. And he said to her, "Honey, as soon as you tape the Earth back together again, I'll go out and play with you." Well, 5 minutes later, she runs back into the room with the world perfectly taped again. And we asked her, "How did you do it?" And she said, "Daddy, in the back of the page, there was a picture of a man's head. As soon as I put the man's head back together again, the world turned out exactly as it should be." So thank you for joining me for the shaman's view. And remember to awaken that inner shaman. Call on that primordial energy. This is the time. And allow that energy to bring you into that intimate relationship with all of life.